but it's just Rand Paul standing up there saying what he believes then about the reproductive rights of women, and the idea that a woman who's raped shouldn't have access to abortion, I think is reprehensible.
It absolutely is. And those 53% of them white women, this is what we're talking about. It's not a classic. This is a very obvious case of voting against your interest and what happens when it backfires. And you thinking that you have this protection when you do not have this protection, right? So
well, some would argue and I agree with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I agree with you totally. But some would argue they were voting in their interest because they were more interested in doing labor on their backs than doing labor inside of a workplace, right?
Right. And I would say this, I really would like to know what that count is, because when it comes to that real count, people talk a good game, but when it comes down to you making decisions about your vagina and your reproductive and all these things, it gets real in the field, right? You could talk a good game when you have the availability of abortion and contraceptives and IUDs, and there's some type of healthcare nearby. Yeah, you could talk all that ish. But when it comes down to it, when you have that unwanted pregnancy or whatever happens in your world, and somebody else or a law has to legislate that, it becomes a whole different thing. Ask a person who's descendant of a slave.
Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times, the freedom voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times, so all can build, let's shine, yeah.
Let's talk about Roe v. Wade. Wow. So in the last several weeks, a document with Politico released a document that was leaked to them that said that the majority conservative members of the Supreme Court had already begun to create a document overturning Roe v. Wade. And that has sent the country in a maelstrom of protests. And so the conversation about already the dwindling reproductive rights of women shot up again. So in conversation with people like you, Sherice, we've begun to talk about the whole spectrum of how if Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would be the long-lasting impacts of it, as well what currently is the situation with reproductive rights already, and also what we were talking about in terms of the replacement theory and one of the ideas that are pushing or moving forward in terms of keeping this quote unquote nation white, the US white, which is totally laughable, right? But let's talk about some of the major components of overturning Roe v. Wade. I mean, I get into arguments all the time about this. Oh my gosh.
So let's first deal with the idea of the leak, right? And the idea that the leak was necessary, I think, because many of the staff, right? Many of the staff know the repercussions for lying in a confirmation hearing. And that is where, from a political science standpoint, I like to start. Because to me, this opens up Amy Coney Barrett, and this also opens up Kavanaugh. It opens up both of them to impeachment. And it opens both of them up to impeachment because they lied in their confirmation hearings, because they were both directly asked about then their take on Roe v. Wade, if that makes any sense. And they were both specifically asked that question, and they both said that they would, they played the political game of saying that they would look at the facts of the case, and they both kind of played the political game as far as political gamesmanship as far as answering the question. So the idea of having a premeditated brief written before any case is before the court then shows that then they lied, or that they were at least misleading in their testimony to Congress, right? And so that's, to me, where I love to start, because we, as a democracy, as a scholar who looks at democracy, and as a scholar that looks at how racism affects democracies, my question is, before we even get to the other tentacles that you're talking about, if we really say we believe in democracy, then we have processes that deal with their malfeasance. What are we going to do about that?
So
right?
I have a question about that, Sherice. What are some things? Because I know Supreme Court members have a high level of protection of not being removed out of the seat. That is so why you're supposed to go through this very extensive vetting process. But what are the things that can make them impeachable? Because people were talking about Clarence Thomas should go because his wife, Jenny, was definitely very involved in some way, shape, or form with the January 6th attempted coup. So what are these things?
And treason is one of them. And some people are arguing that that he should be impeached based upon treason. I don't. What I'm saying. What I'm seeing currently, and again, I'm not read in on any special documents, but what I'm seeing currently, she was very involved, et cetera, but no funds came out of his account. Nothing that was directly tied to him and his name then affected the quote unquote steal, right? Or to reverse the steal, right? And so in his case, where treason is treason, right? The releasing of classified documents, right? All those types of things. And this is where people need to be clear. A brief, right, or a mock brief, which is what this was, is not a classified document. So when everybody's coming back and arguing to me about, well, whoever leaked it, they should be in trouble because it was then a secure document. It is not. A brief is not considered to be a classified document, if that makes any sense. So they can put it this way: anything that the president can be impeached for, the Supreme Court justices can be impeached for. That's the way to best think about it. And the reason that I'm saying that I believe that this is the case for Amy Coney Barrett and at least Brett Kavanaugh is because they perjured. It could be considered that they perjured themselves
into the position
to get the position, right? Because when you testify before Congress, you take an oath that what you're saying is to be truthful. And if and Roberts, and then the argument will come, well, we don't know if the brief was really from them or they participated. Well, no, Roberts came out after the White House said, we do not know if this is official brief or if this was if this brief was officially leaked from the Supreme Court, if this has any Supreme Court ties. And so that has now been disproven because Chief Justice Roberts came out and authenticated the brief. So then if he's authenticated the brief and 6 people have been confirmed to then participate in the creation of this brief, then that means that Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett are directly linked to that, which then to me opens them up for perjury. So that's where I like to start, because this is where this is the prime example that I give to folks that democracy works one way for who we want it to work for, and works a different way for who we want it to work for, right? And to me, that's the structural component of this. I think the second piece of it for me is the idea of the grandstanding, right, by these same senators or by these same congressmen who have most likely paid for abortions themselves, right? So that I love to start with the perjury piece, because then it gets to the nature of the dishonesty of the men that are even having the discussions around legislation at the federal level about the litigating over a woman's body. Because many of these white men have, I can bet my bottom dollar, Kaiya, that these white men have paid for abortions, and they're sitting right now at the highest annals of our government and functioning and working. So that's the next piece, is this dishonesty. What are then the repercussions of this? I think that we get into a dangerous backslide, not just reproduction rights for women, but we get into a dangerous backslide for the regulation of women, period, right? My grandmother is 88 years old, and she was not able to have a bank account with her name on it until she was 32 years old. any bank account that she had before then had to have a man's name on it. So my thing is, Roe v. Wade is like you said previously, has a large slippery slope. We're not just talking about reproduction. We're talking about the ability to litigate on create laws about women's children. We're having a conversation about the financial rights of women. We're going to have conversations about land, right? The land ownership or succession in a family, right? So if you are in a family that has a brother, right, and the law currently stands, right, that the siblings take equal part. Well, if you are in a family that has an estate and there's only one male heir, then all the money then could go to him. That's to me the slippery slope that I'm thinking about. And the reason I'm thinking about this is I recently, not recently, about a year ago, honed in on a book called Men's Laws and Women's Lives. And it gives a complete history about how men have controlled the rights of women through law. And reproduction is just one leg of that, right? Reproduction is just one piece of that. And so to me, that's the larger scope that I'm thinking about, if that makes sense, is where we know what they're trying to do as far as regulating bodies, but what does this then mean for my holistic understanding of what my life means in this democracy if Roe v. Wade is overturned?
Right. I mean, there's even, legislation that's trying to be passed that, makes it illegal for contraceptions or to put, women in jail for taking Plan B, right?
No, that passed right here in Louisiana.
That passed. Oh, it did. Oh, okay.
It passed right here in Louisiana. It is illegal to get an IUD.
Illegal to get an IUD. This is the ramifications of this is absolutely extraordinarily high. The stakes are high. When we already have seen what happens when you oppress not 50% of the population, but about 52% of the population. And on top of that, what it looks like in communities of color, and how communities of color, unfortunately, in this conversation have been the puppets, articulating this agenda and saying that, oh, well, this really is about that there are high numbers of Black women who are using abortion as a form of
and that is
of contraception.
Untrue. That's factually untrue. I mean, it's factually untrue. I think, and it's hard to verify this data because of HIPAA laws. So it's difficult to verify this data. But I think Brookings found a way to capture a lot of this, and it's just factually untrue. And I can't. And I should have had prepared with me the Brookings report that talked about this in 2018, where that is just factually untrue. Now, why they use that as the case is because they use Planned Parenthood numbers, and
Correct.
Planned Parenthood is not just used for the termination of pregnancies. One of the biggest reasons that there is a high influx of Black women that may be at a Planned Parenthood is because of the lack of formalized health care.
Correct.
And so a lot of Black women are not going to Planned Parenthood to get an abortion. They are using Planned Parenthood to then deal with their gynecological health. And what people do not know is that the number of women that increased as far as using Planned Parenthood services increased after Obamacare, because Obamacare then allowed for you to make your gynecologist your primary care physician. And so then it in many ways created an umbrella for Black women that they were now insulated in, or not insulated, but then they were included inside of the healthcare system, because they were able to list the doctor that they see at Planned Parenthood as their primary care physician.
You know who I need to get on with, actually, both of us. There is an African-American, she is one of 6 African-Americans who have a clinic that specializes in abortion care. And we had a really extensive conversation about it. And she talked about a litany of myths connected and tied to Planned Parenthood. One of the things that she also pointed out is that even though numerically majority women seek services at Planned Parenthood, but men also come in and also seek services too as well. And so it's the cut off your nose in spite of your face issue. Where are we? What is the likelihood of Roe v. Wade being overturned?
It's very high. Mm-hmm. And I think that from a political standpoint, right? Because I'm a political scientist, I think that's why in many ways the brief was leaked, because it was to shake up folks who are feeling lackluster about these midterms. It was to in many ways open their eyes. For instance, in this midterm coming up, Rand Paul is up for re-election. He, Lord Booker is his last name, that the black male that's going up against him, right?
Yeah. He tried to run for something else in the last election. He did not win, right?
He did not. But this has now increased his giving campaigns, because it's awakened people, because now people are starting to feel or understand that there are consequences to voting, right? The only reason we have this 6-3 majority is because Trump then that they stole a seat, really, because they never let Brett Kavanaugh have a hearing, right? I mean, not Brett Kavanaugh. They never let Merrick Garland have a hearing under the Obama administration, and so Brett Kavanaugh was like the stolen the stolen Supreme Court seat in some ways, and then Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies, and then we get Amy Coney, right? So and although Trump was only in office for 4 years, not then voting or not then engaging in the process gets the court to be the most lopsided it's been in 50 years. Mm-hmm. We've always seen, right, this almost neck and neck, this 5-4, right, decision. Now we have a lopsided court that then doesn't reflect really the sentiments throughout the country. And I've said several times that the court needs to be expanded, and not just because of the 6-3, because we are the smallest Supreme Court in a Western democracy. And
I did not know that.
We're the smallest Supreme Court inside of a Western democracy. And then it doesn't reflect the current districts. One of the biggest reasons that the number of justices, the reflection or the growth of the court has always been around the number of federal districts. Well, we have 11 federal districts, but only 9 Supreme Court justices. So the other issue that for me, it really illuminates here is the idea that the structure is failing us. And if we don't get serious about making some structural changes, then they are going to legislate us. They are going to cut up the map. They're going to do everything in their grips to win. And like my father said to me when I was a young girl, he said, white folks will blow this place up before they share it. And what I feel like this blow up is I'm going to legislate you to death. I'm going to change the rules to you to death. And I think now, this is opening, and this is very eye-opening for white women who thought that they had some level of security behind white men. And I wrote on Twitter just last night, right, that one of the biggest reasons that Hillary Clinton was vilified out the gate so much is because she shared the bed with a white man who in many ways people felt had empowered her. And that was the danger of a smart white woman, is that by being the bedfellow of white men who often perpetrate atrocities, white women can participate as well as stop them. And so the idea of educating, the idea of empowering, and I'm not trying to argue for the greatness of Hillary Clinton. What I am saying is that her level of empowerment needed to be squashed quickly before it then gave white women the idea of, instead of just being complicit in the atrocities of white men, being powerful enough to stop.
Right, because, Hillary Clinton will always forever be problematic, and Bill, from my perspective. But if you have this history in the United States where when it came to politics, for majority of US politics, if you look at the whole history, women, when they were sitting or active in an electoral position, only got the seat because their husband died. So it was like a proxy, like a Amy Coney Barrett, right? Amy Coney Barrett. So it was a proxy type of seating, and you basically did whatever you were dictated to do by the party that you represented. But here comes Hillary Clinton, who, you know, postures herself as having a very clear, very solo, very informed and sophisticated view of how she sees things, of how she's going to move politically. And that threatens the white male hegemon in the United States. So I 100% agree. I wanted to let people know it's Charles Booker that you're talking about.
Thank you.
Running for in Kentucky. Yeah, because I don't want people to get that mixed up with Cory Booker in Jersey. We're talking about
and that
Charles
was why
Booker.
I didn't. That's why I didn't want to say. I didn't want to baffle the first name, but I knew his last name is Booker because I just gave some money to him. That's how I know his last name is Booker.
Yeah, and he's
it's on my bank statement as Booker.
So Charles Booker.
Charles Booker. If people know about it, and the reason I'm bringing that up is because Rand Paul has been one of the most vocal about the stringent, I would say the excessive nature of abortion, right? Because he doesn't even think that there should be an exception for rape or incest, right? He's one of those that doesn't even believe. So to me, it was, I mean, Charles Booker was very smart as then to use this to then start drawing more money into campaign funds, because he just got to playing it over and over and over again, and it just says Charles Booker endorses this, you know, but it's just Rand Paul standing up there saying what he believes then about the reproductive rights of women, and the idea that a woman who's raped shouldn't have access to abortion, I think is reprehensible.
It absolutely is. And those 53% of them white women, you know, this is what we're talking about. It's not a classic. This is a very obvious case of voting against your interest and what happens when it backfires, and you thinking that you have this protection when you do not have this protection, right? So
some would argue and I agree with you. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I agree with you totally. But some would argue they were voting in their interest because they were more interested in doing labor on their backs than doing labor inside of a workplace, right?
Right. And I would say this, I really would like to know what that count is, because when it comes to that real count, people talk a good game, but when it comes down to you making decisions about your vagina and your reproductive and all these things, it gets real in the field, right? You could talk a good game when you have the availability of abortion and contraceptives and IUDs, and there's some type of healthcare nearby. Yeah, you could talk all that ish. But when it comes down to it, when you have that unwanted pregnancy or, you know, or whatever happens in your world, and you now somebody else or a law has to legislate that, it becomes a whole different thing. Ask a person who's descendant of a slave.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Arc Republic. If you like what you see and you like what you hear, you can actually keep this mothership going. How? You can make a tax-deductible donation in several ways. One, Cash App us at Arc Republic Media. And you can also go on our website, arcrepublic.com/donate. As well, you can also donate to our fiscal sponsor and our sister organization at Black Farmers Index, that is Cash App, or also go onto their website, blackfarmersindex.com. We are two Black women-owned media organizations who share our profits so folk can thrive.
But so this is, I think, a perfect segue into his manifesto,
and the 180-page manifesto. Yes,
right, where he's directly speaking about replacement theory.
Yes, right? Yes. right? You know what I'm saying? That's like
and that I think that's the other piece of repercussion that we're not thinking about. It just because it's illegal doesn't mean it's going to stop.
Correct.
So now what we are seeing is we are now having to think about, or we need to be serious about the idea of the death rate of women going up. Mm-hmm. And this is very dangerous for Black women because Black women are already 6 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women. So now let's say this Black woman, right? This Black woman gets pregnant. She's already not getting great health care. She's going to resort to home remedies or other tactics. When her life is on the line, she's going to be taken to a hospital, and then she's not going to, and this is all scenario, and then she's not going to be taken serious about the nature of her injuries and may succumb to those injuries because of the healthcare system that we currently have that do not take Black women serious. So for me, this is even a more serious issue for Black women, not just because of the inability, not because of the population piece, but it's a more serious issue to me for Black women because the idea that you may then go to a home remedy that may cost you your life.
Well, I would say that is more of an extreme, but even if it comes down to the birthing situation, we're talking about just basically life and death scenarios in different facets of the pregnancy, from, you know, the time you find out to now, even if you go into the labor and delivery room, which is what you're talking about. But at the same time, I just am thinking about too, in these households where you do not have control or power, what that looks like in terms of the upshoot of rapes, the upshoot of sexual assaults, and all these things where the person on the other end is not going to be fully protected.
Well, and to that very point, right? So this week, I'm a member of the 100 Black women here in Baton Rouge, and I'm the chair of the Public Policy Committee, right? And one of the things that we're advocating for right now is a separate domestic abuse court. Because we feel that if and now, especially on the heels of the idea that Roe v. Wade is going to be overturned, it was already a discussion, but now it has become even more. The advocacy for it has become to like a fervorous pitch, because the idea is, to your point about sexual assault and sexual abuse, right, if there is no domestic court that then deals with those issues separately, we are putting those women back into they get lost in the system already, but what we are doing is we are directly putting them back into the hands of their abusers. And so to your exact point about that, you know, if it is overturned, which, you know, I think is up in the air now, basically because of this political of the political moment. But we have to think about counter strategies, and one of the counter strategies that was on the table, just about trying to reduce domestic violence, was this different court. But now I think that is a strategy that women should be looking at across states, right? That women need to be looking at how to get a domestic court in your state, so that you do not go to criminal or civil court. You have your own court that then litigates these. I mean, not litigates, but that then adjudicates these matters. Because if not, then we're just going to, in my opinion, normalize sexual assault again.
Right, and then I mean, there's so many. When you said that, it made me think about, there was an article I read that said that there's an app that helps you regulate your cycle, or, you know the times in when you are fertile or most fertile, will highly likely be pregnant. It has shot up in terms of the downloads, even though it may be presented as something. It was presented as like, oh, this is like good business. It's so, to me, sickening, you know, how people can remove themselves from the moral, ethical aspects of it. But it also got me thinking about the privacy issues that are leaking into this issue, you know, and the lack of privacy and the surveillance or the surveilling of just not, you know, this whole thing of women's bodies. I think it becomes an abstract idea for people. But if there is a woman who is, quote unquote, of childbearing age, oh God, this sounds like The Handmaid's Tale to me. If there's a woman of childbearing age, then there will be some certain levels of surveillance or surveilling on her that will be placed what that looks like, I don't know. I wish somebody would come into my house. They're going to meet Roscoe and Cisco at the same time. But anyway, that was
well, I use one of those apps. I use one of those apps because I am in childbearing age, and I have a 9-year-old son. I have a 14-year-old daughter by marriage. And me and my husband are in a place that we do not want any more children. I am not currently, I have no problem saying that I'm not currently using any level of contraceptives, but I rely heavily on that app. I do. And I rely heavily on that app. Not just for, and this is what people don't understand, the app does more than just tell you when you're due for the cycle or then your high fertility periods. It also helps to really keep a diary of the symptoms. And it was when it was using that app that I realized that I had a chronic migraine that was then attached then to my cycle. And there were some other discoveries that happened because it was then producing chemicals that were then shooting up that then gave me the migraine. And I found out there were some other health issues I had. So what people don't understand is that the app, to your point about the app, like the app has so many other implications more than just for fertility, right? It can literally be the gateway to help you to notice other things that are going on in your body. And to your point, if privacy is not then conducted properly on these apps,
I'm gonna tell you that right now, they're not.
Right. And that's only, put like this, that's only going to get worse. It's not going to get any better.
That's
right.
Correct.
It's only going to get worse. It's not going to get any better. And then what are we going to say then? What are we going to say then when you have Roscoe, right, at the door when folks show up? And now Cisco. We have a big right now, and Cisco, right? Well, now we have a bigger issue, right? Because now we are talking about your Second Amendment right. That now we're talking. No.
You're raising great points.
Now we're having a conversation about your Second Amendment right versus someone else's Second Amendment right. So I guess that's what my thing is about this whole overturning of Roe v. Wade. We're talking about a slippery slope when it comes to many pieces of our democracy and many pieces of our public policy when it comes to women.
Mm-hmm. And and oh Lord, I'm calling it Jesus, and it's a Sunday, goddamn it, and I say goddamn it right after I say Jesus. But anyway, this has me in such a. But I've been thinking about this so much. There's so many conversations that are connected to this. I know this is something that we're going to continue, and I want to say. Luckily, I have a son by marriage who is 25. He is out the house, but been knowing him since he was 7 years old. I've been a co-parent. However, being the mother or co-mother of a son, you have to have these really intense conversations about the responsibility of a man. If there was any other time that your man and you think your man is dope for them to stand up, it is right now. Tupac said, got game from a woman, got name from a woman. I got game from my daddy. You know what I'm saying? Got my name from my daddy. And so it is so important that these men in our communities that go across the racial ethnic spectrum advocate as hard for this as the women are, because it will ultimately bleed in and leak into your home and the private decisions that you make. Because what we presented were two very different households that have an understanding that has been made in love and respect and honor, And so this is going to be very important and critical to see what the men are saying. Unfortunately, and this is across the racial spectrum, but I'm specifically talking about in the Black community, there has been this rise or emergence of this ideology amongst Black male species, Black men, that sees Black women as the enemy number one. I think that's like, just to kind of sum it up, to be pathological, to be the result of all of the things that are bad in the Black community, undeserving of care, of nurturing, and that becomes very problematic, because just as the white supremacist 18-year-old guy, the Grendons of the world, you also are seeing these younger men or males that are trying to be men, creating these ideologies based on false narratives, on insecurities, on immaturity, and have subsequent consequences in the community. And what we're seeing is that it's having legislative consequences too.
Well, since you've gone down that rabbit hole, let's just talk about it. So, and to me, this is the danger of the Kevin Samuels of the world, right?
Oh boy,
this is the danger of them, and this is the danger of then glorifying opinions that then are not factually based. And I'm not here to disparage stump on a man's grave, but what I am saying is that many people now feel lost because many people feel lost because of his absence, right? Many young Black males, and I would even argue some group of Black females feel lost now that this voice is gone, a voice that was built on false narratives, on the idea that Black women are the poison in the Black community, right? And to me, that's just problematic when it comes to the idea of the offspring that she produces, because then it makes it so that that Black man doesn't have the same responsibility to that offspring because the woman is poisoned, right? And so you open that door, and I just wanted to step through it to say that we have to be careful who we are lifting up and giving credence to, as far as the Black family construction, as far as Black reproduction, and I mean that physically, mentally, and spiritually. And we have to then be very, very careful of how to then guard spaces for Black men who want to ask the questions in a space where they're not vilified by other Black men for asking questions or being open about their feelings when it comes to Black women, and having safe spaces to work through those feelings without then being seen as less than a man because they're working through those feelings.
Right. We did one show on Kevin Samuels, and I tend to stay away from what I call celebrity relationship experts, period. Right. Because, me being in the media space now, it'll be 30 years this year. I've seen not a Kevin Samuels, but a, whatever it is, spiritual person, relationship person, financial experts, real estate. I've seen all these, and they all have been scammers, right? Or at the I would say at best have been playing on the emotional, emotional, psychological underdevelopment of a part of the population in order for profit gain and personal interest. And when their personal lives are unveiled, you see they are the exact opposite of what they criticize or they say that we need to be. And so Kevin Samuels, in my opinion, became very dangerous, especially something like Ark Republic, when we got, a journalist that doesn't even work for Ark Republic, we got attached to when the R. Kelly trials came out, of how people control and take down pages and all these different things that happen in the tech space, because a lot of these platforms are all these platforms are privately owned, so they can do what it is that you want. But somebody like a Kevin Samuels commanding that much, I don't want to say influence, but control over this space or this dimension, where you clearly have a collective of Black men trying to figure it out and not having a platform or a space, as you said, in order to work through a myriad of issues that have been developed over time and properly make sense of them and adequately grow out of that. And also seeing that this represented probably one of the most current kind of real places that they felt like somebody understand them, and the dangers of what that means for a Kevin Samuels. I can say out without a doubt, whoever backed Kevin Samuels, I don't know the people that backed Kevin Samuels, you have to have a lot of money, a lot of tech influence in order to, this person did not come out of anywhere. Like, the algorithms just don't bend into that person's favor. There are people behind that are picking and deciding who plays this plays this role. So I just did not want to get into Kevin Samuels because it would just open up to me unnecessarily back and forth. But the conversations after have been absolutely fascinating. And because I have not really necessarily engaged in that population and just chose to step back, now I'm seeing all these different conversations as a result of it. But overall, I'm saying there's a lot going on in this world. And we have reduced ourselves to the death of one person talking about pseudo fake relationship, whatever, and a very skewed and baseless understanding of what manhood, masculinity, and men were like, and women, femininity, and all these different things. When we know that there is no one note man or masculinity or woman or femininity, we have represented a gamut of spectrum of what that is. In particular, even in the United States, when I, as a Black woman, my grandmother was 6'3", 280 pounds with guns, and and had 10 children, right? And would be considered something else today's time, but she was very much a woman, and she knew she was very much a woman, and she was treated very much as a Black woman during that day. So I know I went on this maybe this tangent in terms of what it is, but this is all connected back to the ramifications of what's going to happen with Roe v. Wade, because what is going to happen to those are going to be the snitches of the community, right? If they don't, I don't know. I mean, I'm just projecting that, but we will see with Roe v. Wade. So your last thoughts on this issue?
My last thoughts are, and I'm a political scientist. Your vote matters. And this whole understanding that it doesn't, I think is really bearing itself out here. So my thing is that if you make a decision not to vote, be clear about what's at stake when you make that decision. I'm always going to advocate for people to do so, but I think we've been too cavalier with understanding the repercussions, because one non-vote in this election has now seated 2 judges that are in their early to mid 50s, which means that we're looking at decisions that they'll affect for at least the next 20 years, right? And so that to me, if not more, at least 20 years, all right? And so that to me is really where we hang our hat. And this is what I will say. And I am working on research. I know that we talked about my book on the Congressional Black Caucus as a whole. I'm now working on a book on the Congressional Black Caucus when it comes to just the women of the Congressional Black Caucus. And what I'm doing, what I've seen in the preliminary research that I'm doing, digging through papers and looking at history, is that Black women have been the force that has made the system more democratous. We have been the force that says, I am the least of these in this country, and what are you going to do about it? And there has been some huge results. And I'm here to say that my life is very different than my grandmother's life, and my grandmother's life is very different than her grandmother, right? My great aunt was 100 and passed away when she was 106, was born in 1898. So I knew her, and the life that she had and she described to me is very different than the life that I have now. And so what I guess my biggest thing at the end of all of this is to say, if we don't want to retard ourselves any further back, we have to get serious about engaging our system at some level so that we can protect the rights that we currently have.
Thank you. I just want to add, too, in terms of being active voting, is just be active politically. Go to your town hall meetings. At the very least, understand politically what's going on. Arc Republic, we just enacted a series called Back to the Bricks, which is an ode to Newark, which is called Brick City. But it really is basically back to local politics and how we really need to keep our eyes on that. There are multiple ways that you can be politically active. So if you don't believe that the vote or you can even, because some people can't even vote, right? We have people who cannot vote still, right? And because of the voter suppression, there are people who are kicked off of the rolls. There are so many ways that you can be and that you should be active between even voting cycles that are so very important. And if you want to know what they are, contact us. Actually, we need to do something about, what that looks like to be politically active outside of voting. Because I think if that could be a really useful tool for folks.
And it will, because all politics is local, right? And I didn't want to. It was a closeout for Roe V Wade, so I didn't want to kind of dive into that. But all politics is local. Mm-hmm. That's what people have to understand, because what you need to understand is that the representative that you vote for at the federal level and how districts are drawn for the federal then affect how the state districts are drawn, then affect who's where and where the precincts are. It's this trickle down effect. So all politics is local. And I agree totally that we need to get our eyes back on the prize of the local, because the states are passing legislation. The states are passing legislation while many of us are still asleep.
I cannot say that word. I mean, that's my Generation X talking to the millennial word. Thank you so very much for talking to ARC Republic about these very critical issues. And I look forward to our next conversation.